However, the fact is that the nurses, of course, knew there was friendly fire because they were handling the outcomes. So they got American soldiers in who had been napalmed. Well, only one side had napalm. So how did these American soldiers get napalmed? You know, so Vandeventer says on page 100, a squad was napalmed by friendly fire. When you smell that in OR, you're liable to lose your lunch. And she talks about this because it's burning flesh, and plus the chemicals. So it's a particular, as I understand it, and I hope I never smell it, a particular just god-awful smell. And the military medicine saves everyone it can. That's the idea, after all. But when years later Vandeventer meets one of these outraged veterans who's been badly, badly mutilated, she says to him, we never thought beyond tomorrow, Calvin. We never thought beyond the next casualties. We just cut them up, sewed them together, and sent them to Japan. Our job was to save lives. Tomorrow was for others to worry about. This is on page 300. So cut them up, sew them together, send them to Japan. The way that this worked was that you treated the soldiers as close as you could to combat. That's what they were doing. So they were doing emergency surgeries, and then they would be transported to Navy ships. The Navy ships would take them to Japan, and in Japan the Americans had hospitals, and there the soldiers got basically recovered. And so very often it was not unknown for soldiers to spend months in Japan before they could be safely moved back to the United States, which was not necessarily such a great thing. It might actually be better for them to be in Japan. We'll see this again. We'll really come back with a vengeance when we come to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, because the time shortened, and as the time shortened, it's even more difficult for people to get their heads around the fact that they a day ago were being bombed in Iraq, and the next day are back in Las Vegas or wherever they come from, California, and are suddenly confronted with the life they'd left, but are completely different. They are completely different individuals. Remember also that nurses automatically are promoted to lieutenant so that they have clout in a medical ward, because one of the common things that had happened in early wars was to have soldiers try to pull rank on nurses. And so what they did was if you became a nurse in the military, you automatically were granted the not in World War II, but in Vietnam, you were automatically granted the rank of a lieutenant. So you could outrank at least the non-coms and say, yes, you are going to do this, Sergeant, back in bed, and so on. And the doctors are automatically captains. So that means that you're following the chain of command, which means you're already following a chain of command anyway in a hospital, where the nurse's job is to do what the doctor has said. The doctor writes the orders, the nurse carries them out, whether they disagree with them or not. But you're still you may have people who are, let's say their politics are hard right wing, and you tend to be liberal. And they're a captain and you're a lieutenant, it may be harder for you to follow the policies which have been outlined for you. So don't be surprised that just because someone is a doctor or a nurse that they don't either say hate the war or feel sympathy for the enemy. They may not. They may think the war is a great idea, and they may feel no sympathy for the enemy whatsoever, except to be enraged that they're killing Americans. Doctors may very as well be hawks as they may be doves. Right? So in O'Neill's story, What Dreams May Come, she says it's about time. She has one of her characters say, "It's about time we went in there, bombed the shit out of them. It's where they're all coming from." On 234, and this issue of one's politics raises the problem of being called up, because doctors were drafted just the way soldiers were. Doctors didn't want to particularly leave civilian practices and go to war. Why would you want to do that? Well, the Army needed a doctor, so they were like, okay, you've been drafted. And they went to the war they believed in, or much worse, or the war they didn't believe in at all. And so this is the struggle which you see in MASH. If you're interested in MASH, I recommend seeing the movie, not the television series. Television series is very sweet. It's very sentimental. It tends to softball the problems. The movie is very Altman, and it's a rebel text, and it's funny. And when people go nuts, they really go nuts, and you'll recognize Frank Burns, who will reappear 9 years later as Captain Kilgore, the crazed army captain in Apocalypse Now. Okay, so that's enough for that little section.